My name is Ethan Mitchell, I'm 28 years old, and I discovered my parents had been lying to me my entire life. While I worked 3 jobs to put myself through college, my sister Caitlin lounged in a fully funded apartment, driving a new car my parents bought her. I never imagined that finding those financial documents would unravel our entire family dynamic. Thank God my grandfather Harold stepped in when he did. Before I dive into how my family's financial favoritism nearly destroyed us, let me know where you're watching from and hit that like and subscribe button to support stories about overcoming family betrayal. I grew up in Brookfield, a comfortable upper-middle-class suburb just outside Boston. Our family home was a spacious colonial with a perfectly manicured lawn that my father Richard obsessed over every weekend. From the outside, we looked like the perfect American family. My mother Diane was a part-time real estate agent who mostly focused on running our household. My father worked as a senior financial advisor at a prestigious firm downtown, and my sister Caitlin and I attended the well-regarded public schools in our district. But inside our household, there were subtle currents of favoritism that I didn't fully recognize until I was older. Caitlin was 2 years younger than me, with our mother's blonde hair and our father's bright blue eyes. She had an outgoing personality that charmed everyone around her, especially our parents. I was more introverted, preferring books and computers to social gatherings. With my grandfather's darker features, the differences in how we were treated started small. When I brought home straight A's on my report card, my parents would nod approvingly and say, "That's what we expect from you, Ethan." But when Caitlin brought home B's and C's, there would be elaborate celebrations, with my mother gushing, "Look how hard she's trying! She's so special!" For my 16th birthday, I received practical gifts, a used laptop for schoolwork and some clothes. When Caitlin turned 16, my parents threw her an extravagant party at a downtown hotel and presented her with a used but very nice car. When I asked about the disparity, my mother simply said, "Your sister needs more social support. You're naturally independent, Ethan." Despite the uneven treatment, I excelled academically. I joined the debate team, became editor of the school newspaper, and maintained a 4.0 GPA throughout high school, while Caitlin struggled to maintain a B average and bounce between various artistic hobbies, quitting each one when it required real discipline. Yet somehow, my parents always framed her as the special one with unique creative gifts that needed nurturing. The real blow came during my senior year of high school. I had been accepted to several excellent universities, including Northwestern, Cornell, and Boston University. I was leaning toward Northwestern, excited about their excellent business program and the opportunity to experience living in Chicago. One evening in April, I sat down at dinner ready to discuss the financial logistics with my parents. "I've been looking at the costs for Northwestern," I began, spreading out the financial aid package they'd offered. "With the partial scholarship, we'd need to cover about $25,000 per year. I can work part-time to help with expenses." My parents exchanged an uncomfortable glance across the table. My father cleared his throat. "Son, your mother and I have been discussing this, and we've made a decision. We believe it's important for you to learn financial responsibility and independence." "What exactly does that mean?" I asked, though a sinking feeling was already forming in my stomach. "It means we won't be contributing to your college education," my mother said gently, reaching for my hand, which I pulled away. "We believe you'll value your education more if you earn it yourself." I sat in stunned silence, my mind racing. We weren't ultra-wealthy, but my parents made good money. I knew college funds had been set up for both Caitlin and me when we were born. "What about my college fund?" I asked. "Grandpa Harold mentioned setting those up for both of us." My father shifted uncomfortably. "That money was invested in some ventures that unfortunately didn't pan out. The timing is unfortunate. But we believe this will make you stronger." 2 months later, Caitlin announced she wanted to attend Berkshire Art Academy, an expensive private arts college known more for its beautiful campus than its academic rigor. To my shock, my parents were thrilled. "Sweetheart, that's perfect for your artistic spirit," my mother exclaimed. "We'll make it work." Later that night, I overheard them discussing the finances. "It's expensive, but she needs this opportunity to find herself," my father said. "We can pull from our savings and the investment account." I confronted them the next morning. "So you can afford Caitlin's expensive art school, but not a dime for my education? It's different," my mother insisted. "Caitlin has special talents that need nurturing. You're academically gifted and can get scholarships. Plus, you're a boy. You'll always be able to make your way in the world." The gender bias stunned me almost as much as the financial betrayal. I spent the summer in a daze, applying for every scholarship I could find and securing student loans to cover the rest. I ultimately chose State University, a solid but less prestigious school that offered me the best financial package. I deferred my dream of Northwestern, telling myself I could perhaps transfer later if I found more funding. As summer ended, I watched my parents take Caitlin shopping for her dorm room, buying her new furniture, electronics, and clothes. For my send-off, I got a handshake from my father and a tearful hug from my mother, who slipped me a $100 bill for emergencies. I packed up my used Honda Civic with second-hand supplies and drove myself to campus, the weight of my family's betrayal sitting heavy on my shoulders. State University wasn't my dream school, but I was determined to make the most of it. My financial aid package covered tuition and basic meal plan, but little else. I found a cramped apartment off campus with 3 roommates to save on housing costs. My roommate Marcus became a close friend, understanding my situation because he too was working his way through college. "Man, your parents really hung you out to dry," Marcus said one night after I got off a 10-hour shift at the campus library, only to start studying for a finance exam. "My mom can't help because she's raising my 3 siblings alone. But at least she sends care packages and calls to check on me." My parents rarely called. When they did, the conversations were brief and superficial. They never asked about my financial situation or offered help. Instead, they'd launch into stories about Caitlin's college experience, oblivious to the comparison they were drawing. "Your sister's art professor says she has extraordinary talent," my mother gushed during one call. "We went up to visit her last weekend. Her apartment near campus is just darling. A bit expensive, but worth it for her safety and comfort." I bit back the obvious question, why wasn't my safety and comfort equally important? Instead, I mumbled something about needing to get to work and ended the call. My schedule was punishing. I worked 20 hours weekly at the campus library and another 15 at a restaurant near campus, all while maintaining a full course load. Sleep became a luxury. Meals were often whatever was cheapest or free at campus events. During my sophomore year, when other students went on spring break trips, I picked up extra shifts to build a small emergency fund. That emergency fund saved me when my car broke down that winter. The repair cost $600 I couldn't spare. I called home in desperation, swallowing my pride. "Dad, my car needs a major repair. I hate to ask, but could you help me out just this once?" I needed to get to work. "Ethan, part of becoming an adult is handling these situations yourself," he replied. "Use this as a learning experience. Perhaps you could get a small loan or pick up more hours at work." Later that same week, Caitlin posted photos on social media of a spring break trip to Cancun. "Thanks Mom and Dad for the best birthday gift ever." Read the caption under a photo of her holding a tropical drink on a white sand beach. I worked double shifts for 3 weeks straight to pay for the car repair, barely sleeping and watching my grades slip for the first time. Professor James from my business ethics class noticed my exhaustion and called me into his office. "You're one of my brightest students, Ethan, but you look like you haven't slept in weeks," he said. "Is everything all right?" Something about his genuine concern broke through my usual stoicism. I found myself telling him everything about my family's situation, the financial disparity, and my growing resentment. Professor James listened without judgment. What you're experiencing isn't just financial hardship, it's a profound inequity within your family system, he said when I finished. I can't fix that for you, but I can help you navigate it. He became a mentor to me, helping me secure a better-paying campus job in the business department, and connecting me with alumni who offered career advice. With his support, I pulled my grades back up and even secured a competitive summer internship at a financial services firm in Boston. That summer, I stayed with my grandfather Harold rather than going home. He lived just outside Boston in a modest but comfortable house. Unlike my parents, he asked thoughtful questions about my studies and seemed genuinely interested in my life. He also noticed my reluctance to discuss my parents. Your father and I have different views on parenting, he said one evening. And on money. I believe in equal opportunity for all children in a family. I nodded but didn't elaborate. I wasn't ready to voice my deepest feelings about my parents' favoritism, even to him. Meanwhile, Caitlin's social media showcased a college experience worlds apart from mine. While I was shelving books at the library, she was joining a sorority. While I was eating ramen noodles, she was dining at trendy restaurants. And while I was driving my 10-year-old Honda with a mysterious rattling sound, she was posting about the brand new Volkswagen our parents bought her. For safety reasons. Despite everything, I excelled academically. I made connections during my internship and positioned myself for a strong entry into the job market. Professor James encouraged me to apply for graduate school. But the thought of taking on more debt was overwhelming. Instead, I focused on finishing my undergraduate degree with honors and lining up job opportunities. By senior year, I had secured a job offer from the firm where I'd interned. The starting salary wasn't extraordinary, but it represented freedom from financial anxiety and the beginning of independence from my family. At graduation, Marcus's entire extended family came to celebrate him, bringing homemade food and handmade signs. My parents and Caitlin showed up 2 hours late, missing the ceremony entirely, full of apologies about traffic that didn't exist. We're so proud of you, honey, my mother said, air kissing near my cheek. We never doubted you could do it on your own. The irony of her statement wasn't lost on me. They hadn't given me a choice about doing it on my own. As we posed for a family photo, my father's hand on my shoulder felt like a stranger's. The entry-level position at Anderson Financial Services wasn't glamorous, but it offered stability I hadn't known in years. I rented a small one-bedroom apartment in a decent part of Boston and began the arduous process of tackling my student loan debt, which totaled just over $70,000 each month. After rent, loans, and basic living expenses, I had very little left over. Still, for the first time since I was 18, I wasn't constantly working while trying to study. 6 months into my new job, my mother called to invite me to Sunday dinner. The whole family will be there, she said. Caitlin is back from her semester abroad in Paris and has some exciting news. I hadn't seen my family much since graduation. Our interactions were limited to obligatory holiday gatherings and the occasional phone call. Part of me wanted to decline, but curiosity about Caitlin's news won out. When I arrived at my parents' house that Sunday, everything looked exactly as it always had. My mother's carefully selected decor, my father's immaculate lawn, the family photos on the walls that somehow made us look closer than we'd ever been. Caitlin arrived late, as usual, breezing in with shopping bags from expensive stores. Sorry I'm late, she announced, not looking particularly sorry. I got caught up with Madison and lost track of time. During dinner, Caitlin dominated the conversation with stories about Paris. My parents listened with rapt attention, asking questions and gasping at all the right moments. No one asked about my job or my life. Finally, over dessert, Caitlin made her announcement. So, I've been doing a lot of thinking about my future, she said, setting down her fork dramatically. And I've decided that art school isn't really the right path for me anymore. My parents nodded encouragingly. My father reached over to pat her hand. We support whatever decision you make, sweetheart. I want to take some time off to find myself. She continued. Maybe do some traveling, explore my options. That sounds wonderful, my mother said. Everyone needs time to figure out their path. I nearly choked on my coffee. Wait, you're dropping out? After 3 years? Caitlin glared at me. I'm not dropping out. I'm taking a sabbatical. A sabbatical from what? You haven't actually started a career yet, I pointed out. Ethan. My father warned. No, I want to understand this, I persisted. Caitlin has been in college for 3 years, presumably on your dime. Now she wants to quit and do some traveling. And you're completely fine with that? We believe in supporting our children's journeys, my mother said primly. Something in me snapped. Really? My journey included working 30 hours a week while maintaining a full course load and graduating with honors. Where was your support then? That was different, my father said dismissively. How? How was it different? I demanded. You needed to learn responsibility, he said. Caitlin is more sensitive. She needs time to find her way. And what about the tens of thousands you've spent on her education that she's now throwing away? My father's face hardened. That's enough, Ethan. Money spent on education is never wasted. Unless it's spent on my education, apparently. I shot back. The room fell silent. Caitlin looked uncomfortable for the first time all evening. Life isn't fair, son, my father finally said. The sooner you accept that, the happier you'll be. It's not about life being fair, I replied, my voice shaking with emotion. It's about parents treating their children equally. It's about not playing favorites so blatantly that one child has to mortgage their future while the other gets unlimited chances. My mother burst into tears. How can you say such hurtful things? We've always loved you both the same. Love isn't just words, Mom. It's actions. And your actions have consistently shown that Caitlin matters more. I stood up, no longer hungry. I need to go. Congratulations on your sabbatical, Caitlin. I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for. The Thanksgiving after that disastrous dinner was even worse. Emboldened by my new financial independence, I asked direct questions about their decisions regarding our educations. My father shut down the conversation by announcing that financial matters are private and should not be discussed at holiday gatherings. When I pointed out the irony of privacy concerns after they dissected my financial aid packages and scholarships in front of extended family years earlier, my mother accused me of always trying to create drama. After that, I pulled back even further. I focused on my career, earning a promotion within my first 18 months at the firm. I built a small but genuine circle of friends, mostly people like Marcus who understood what it meant to make your own way. I dated occasionally but was hesitant to get serious, aware that my family issues and financial constraints complicated relationships. Meanwhile, according to my parents' social media and occasional updates, Caitlin was finding herself through expensive yoga retreats in Bali, a stint at a culinary school in Italy she didn't complete, and a brief attempt at starting a lifestyle blog funded by our parents. With each new adventure, my resentment grew, not so much toward Caitlin but toward my parents and their blatant double standard. As I approached my 27th birthday, I had made significant progress in my career and paid down a chunk of my student loans, but the emotional wound of my family's treatment remained raw. I saw my parents and Caitlin only when absolutely necessary, maintaining a polite but distant relationship. I told myself I had accepted the reality of our family dynamic, but deep down, the injustice still burned. 3 years into my career at Anderson Financial, I received an unexpected call from my mother. "Your father's computer is giving him fits, and he has an important presentation tomorrow. Could you possibly come over and take a look? You've always been so good with technology." It was the first time in years they'd asked for my help with anything. Despite my reservations, I agreed to stop by after work. When I arrived, my father was already at a neighborhood association meeting, and my mother had to run a quick errand, leaving me alone with the malfunctioning computer. The issue was simple enough to fix a corrupted driver causing the presentation software to crash. While searching for the appropriate update, I navigated through my father's meticulously organized file system. A folder labeled Family Finances caught my eye. I hesitated, my finger hovering over the mousepad. This was an invasion of privacy, but after years of questions and vague answers about the mysterious disappearance of my college fund, curiosity won out. What I found shattered any remaining illusions about my family. There was no failed investment that had depleted my college fund. Instead, I found detailed records of Caitlin's trust fund, which held over $500,000. My name appeared nowhere in these documents. I dug deeper, finding years of financial statements showing regular transfers to Caitlin's accounts, regular deposits covering her rent, credit card bills, car payments, and even shopping sprees. One spreadsheet detailed all educational expenses, her full tuition at art school, study abroad program, the culinary course in Italy, even private tutors when she struggled with basic courses. Most devastating were the email exchanges between my parents discussing how to manage Ethan's expectations and ensure I didn't discover the disparity in financial support. They had actively conspired to hide their favoritism, creating elaborate justifications for why I needed to be financially independent while Caitlin needed their support. "Ethan is naturally more capable," my father had written in one email. "He'll be fine without our help, and it will make him stronger. Caitlin is more like her mother, fragile and artistic. She'll never survive in the real world without our safety net." I sat frozen in my father's office chair, staring at the evidence of years of deliberate deception. It wasn't just about the money, though the financial disparity was shocking. It was the calculated nature of their favoritism. The way they had deliberately constructed different futures for their children based on arbitrary preferences. When I heard my parents' car in the driveway, I quickly closed the files but couldn't bring myself to leave the office. They found me still sitting there, my face pale. "Did you fix the computer?" my father asked, oblivious to my distress. "I found the files," I said quietly. My father's expression shifted instantly from confusion to cold defensiveness. "You had no right to go through my personal files. And you had no right to lie to me for my entire life," I countered, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "There was never any failed investment, was there? You just decided I didn't deserve the same support as Caitlin." My mother sank into a nearby chair, her hand covering her mouth. My father remained standing, his posture rigid. "We made the decisions we thought were best for both of you," he said. "How was cheating me out of an education while bankrolling Caitlin's everyone best for either of us?" I demanded. "Do you have any idea what it's like to work until 2 in the morning, then get up for an 8 a.m. class? To count pennies for groceries while your sister posts Instagram photos from first-class cabins? She needs more help than you," my father replied coldly. "You were always able to manage." "I managed because I had no choice. You gave me no choice." My mother was crying now, mascara streaking down her cheeks. "We always loved you both the same," she insisted weakly. "No, you didn't," I said, the truth of it striking me with perfect clarity. "You loved us differently, and you decided a long time ago that Caitlin was worth investing in and I wasn't. That's not fair," my mother protested. "None of this has been fair," I replied, gathering my things. "And I'm done pretending it has been." I walked out of their house that night and didn't look back. I blocked their numbers, removed them from my social media, and told my apartment building's security not to allow them entry if they showed up. The finality of the break brought both grief and relief. I felt orphaned by choice, cast adrift from my family history, but also freed from the constant pain of their rejection. In the weeks that followed, I fell into a deep depression. The foundation of my identity, who I thought I was in relation to my family, had crumbled. I questioned everything about my childhood, re-examining memories through the lens of what I now knew. Had I really been the self-sufficient, independent child they claimed? Or had I simply adapted to their emotional and financial neglect, becoming what they needed me to be to justify their favoritism? I took a week off work, barely leaving my apartment. Friends called and texted, but I couldn't bring myself to explain what had happened. How do you tell someone that your parents simply didn't value you as much as your sibling? That they had systematically privileged her future over yours? The humiliation was almost as painful as the betrayal. 3 weeks after my discovery and subsequent break with my parents, an unexpected knock came at my apartment door. Through the peephole, I saw my grandfather Harold's weathered face. I hadn't spoken to him since the fallout, though we'd always had a good relationship. "I know what happened, Ethan," he said when I opened the door. "May I come in?" Harold looked older than I remembered, his tall frame slightly stooped now, but his eyes were as sharp and perceptive as ever. I stepped aside to let him enter. "Your mother called me," he explained, settling onto my couch. "She's quite distraught." "I'm sure she is," I replied, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. "Finding out your decades-long conspiracy has been discovered must be very upsetting." Harold nodded, surprising me. "I'm not here to defend them, Ethan. I'm here because I should have intervened years ago, and I failed you by not doing so." His candor caught me off guard. "You knew?" "Not the extent of it, no. I knew there was favoritism. I'd have to be blind not to see it. But I didn't know about the trust fund disparity, or the deliberate deception about your college funding." He ran a hand through his thinning silver hair. "I only learned the full story when your mother called me crying about how you'd overreacted to some files you found." I pressed her for details, and the whole ugly truth came out. I offered him coffee, which he accepted, and we sat in silence for a moment. "Did you know that your father was the less favored child in his family?" Harold finally asked. This was news to me. No. He never talked much about his childhood. Richard's brother Thomas was the golden child. Athletic, charming, everyone's favorite. Your father was always second best in his parents' eyes. I watched it happen and tried to compensate by spending extra time with Richard, but the damage was done. Harold sighed heavily. I always feared he might repeat the pattern, but in reverse, making his son prove himself while indulging his daughter. Why didn't you say anything? I asked. Family dynamics are complicated. I told myself it wasn't my place to interfere, that perhaps I was seeing shadows of the past where none existed. He looked me directly in the eyes. I was wrong, and I'm sorry, Ethan. His apology, so straightforward and sincere, loosened something tight in my chest. What happens now? I asked. I can't just pretend none of this happened. No, you can't. And you shouldn't. Harold set down his coffee cup with a decisive click. I've been thinking about this situation since your mother's call. I've built a successful business and have considerable resources. I also have significant influence over certain family matters, including the family business your father now runs, which was started by my father. My grandfather had built his initial small manufacturing business into a diversified corporation before semi-retiring and handing over control of the main family business to my father years ago. I knew he still held considerable ownership stakes. What are you suggesting? I asked cautiously. I'm suggesting that it's time to correct an injustice, Harold replied. I've always believed in fairness, especially where family is concerned. What your parents did was wrong, not just morally but potentially legally as well. Trusts established for minors have certain obligations attached to them. I don't want to sue my parents, I said quickly. Despite everything, I don't want to destroy the family. The family is already damaged, Ethan. But I'm not talking about lawsuits. I'm talking about using my position to ensure proper restitution and, more importantly, accountability. He outlined a plan that was both strategic and measured. Harold would use his considerable business influence to address the situation. Calling for a family meeting including the financial advisor who had helped orchestrate the disparity. Your parents need to face what they've done, he said. Not just the financial aspect, but the emotional damage their favoritism has caused. And Caitlin needs to understand the privilege she's enjoyed at your expense. I was hesitant. Won't this just create more conflict? More pain? Sometimes healing requires lancing the wound first, Harold said. This pattern has to be broken, Ethan. Not just for your sake, but for the future of the family. What happens when Caitlin has children? Or if you do? Will the same toxic patterns of favoritism continue into the next generation? His words resonated with something deep inside me. I didn't want revenge, but I did want acknowledgement. Recognition of the injustice. And most of all, I wanted to ensure these patterns wouldn't continue. There's something else you should know, Harold added. Your father has been making some questionable decisions with the family business finances. Nothing illegal, but certainly ill-advised. I've been looking the other way out of respect for his position, but perhaps it's time for a more thorough review. We talked for hours that day, mapping out a plan that would address the financial inequities without destroying the family completely. Harold's wisdom and business acumen provided structure to my hurt and anger, channeling it toward constructive resolution rather than pure retribution. Before he left, Harold placed a hand on my shoulder. You've shown remarkable strength throughout all this, Ethan. Building a life for yourself despite the obstacles they placed in your way. I'm proud of you, and I should have told you that more often. His words, so simple yet so longed for, brought unexpected tears to my eyes. For the first time since discovering the truth, I felt a glimmer of hope that something positive might emerge from this painful situation. 2 weeks after my grandfather's visit, I received a formal email from him requesting my presence at his home for a family financial meeting. All family members would be attending, along with Walter Green, the family's longtime financial advisor. I recognized this as the first step in our agreed-upon plan and confirmed my attendance with a mix of anxiety and resolve. Harold's house was larger than my parents', but less ostentatious. Its traditional New England architecture reflected his practical, no-nonsense personality. When I arrived, his housekeeper Marta showed me to the study, where Harold was arranging papers on a large oak table. Are you ready for this? He asked without preamble. As ready as I'll ever be, I replied. My parents arrived next, my father's face set in stern lines, my mother looking nervous. They barely acknowledged me. Caitlin came last, 20 minutes late as usual, looking confused about why she'd been summoned so formally. What's this about, Grandpa? She asked, kissing Harold's cheek. Your email sounded super serious. It is serious, Harold confirmed. Please, everyone take a seat. Walter Green arrived precisely on time, carrying a leather portfolio and wearing the grave expression of someone who knows he's walking into a difficult situation. I had met him a few times at family events but knew him primarily as my father's trusted financial advisor. Once everyone was seated, Harold stood at the head of the table. Despite his age, he commanded the room with natural authority. I've called this meeting to address a serious matter affecting our family, he began. Recently, it has come to my attention that there has been a significant disparity in how financial resources have been allocated between Ethan and Caitlin. My father immediately tried to interrupt, but Harold held up a hand. Richard, you'll have your chance to speak. But first, we all need to understand exactly what has occurred. He proceeded to outline, with devastating precision, the extent of the financial favoritism. The trust fund established for Caitlin but not for me. The tens of thousands spent on her education, housing, cars, and lifestyle, contrasted with the complete lack of support for my education. The deliberate deception about the existence of funds that had supposedly been set aside for me. Caitlin's face registered increasing shock as Harold continued. My mother stared at her hands folded in her lap. My father's expression hardened into defensiveness. This isn't just about money, Harold concluded. It's about fundamental fairness within a family, and the damage that can be done when parents systematically favor one child over another. This is a private family matter. My father finally said, his voice tight. With all due respect, Father, how we chose to allocate our resources in raising our children was our decision. Was it solely your decision, Richard? Harold asked. Because the initial trusts were established with my money, with very specific instructions about their purpose and administration. He turned to Walter Green. Walter, would you please explain what happened to the trust fund that was established for Ethan when he was born? Walter cleared his throat uncomfortably. The trust was established with equal amounts for both children. However, when Ethan was about 12, Richard requested that Ethan's trust be restructured, with the assets gradually transferred to Caitlin's trust. And did you advise against this move? Harold asked. I did, Walter confirmed. I expressed concern about the ethical and potential legal issues involved. But Richard insisted it was a family decision. My father's face flushed with anger. I made decisions based on what I thought was best for both children. Ethan showed self-sufficiency early on. Caitlin needed more support. That's a convenient narrative, I said, speaking for the first time. But the reality is that I became self-sufficient because I had to. I was never given any other option. Caitlin looked at me, then at our parents. I didn't know, she said quietly. I never realized. I thought we were just different. That you were better with money, more disciplined. That's what they wanted you to think, I replied. It's what they wanted everyone to think, including me. Harold directed Walter to distribute copies of financial summaries he had prepared. The documents laid bare the stark contrast between the financial support provided to each of us over the years. Seeing it quantified so precisely $17,000 total support for me versus over $600,000 for Caitlin was breathtaking. There's more, Harold said gravely. In reviewing these financial records, Walter discovered some concerning patterns in the family business accounts. This was not part of our original plan, and I glanced at Harold in surprise. Walter took over, explaining how my father had been using business funds to indirectly support Caitlin's lifestyle, categorizing personal expenses as business costs and potentially exposing the company to tax issues. This isn't just about poor parenting choices anymore, Harold said. This is about fiduciary responsibility and business ethics. My father's face had gone from red to ashen. Those allocations were all legitimate business expenses, he insisted. But his voice lacked conviction. Richard, we've worked together for over 20 years, Walter replied gently. We both know that's not true. A heavy silence fell over the room. My mother was openly crying now. Caitlin looked stunned. So what happens now? My father finally asked, his voice hollow. That depends, Harold said, looking around the table. Ethan has shown remarkable restraint in not taking legal action, which he would be well within his rights to do. Instead, he's willing to discuss a family resolution. All eyes turned to me. I had thought carefully about what I wanted from this confrontation. Not revenge, but accountability and change. I want 3 things, I said calmly. First, financial restitution for the college fund that was taken from me, plus interest. Second, a restructuring of family business governance to ensure nothing like this happens again. And third, I want acknowledgement from both of you. I looked directly at my parents. That what you did was wrong. Not just financially, but emotionally. The way you've treated me my entire life was deeply unfair. That's outrageous. My father began, But my mother touched his arm. "No, Richard," she said softly. "Ethan is right. What we did was wrong. I've known it for years but convinced myself we were doing what was best." She looked at me with tear-filled eyes. "I'm so sorry, Ethan. We failed you terribly." Her unexpected apology caught me off guard. It was the first time she had ever acknowledged the favoritism without excuses or deflection. Harold outlined his proposal for resolution. My student loans would be paid in full from family funds, an equal trust would be established for me, and the family business would undergo a restructuring with greater oversight. Most significantly, he announced his intention to revise his own estate planning to address the imbalance that had been created. "I've always planned to divide my estate equally between my grandchildren," he said. "But now I see that additional measures are needed to ensure fairness is maintained." My father sat in stunned silence, the implications of Harold's words clear. His mismanagement of family finances and his treatment of me would have significant consequences for his position in the family business. Caitlin, who had been unusually quiet, finally spoke up. "I had no idea about any of this," she said, looking at me with genuine remorse. "I always thought. I don't even know what I thought. That I was special somehow? That I deserved it?" She shook her head. "I'm so sorry, Ethan. I should have questioned it. All those times you couldn't come home for holidays because you were working, or when you were stressed about tuition payments. I just accepted what Mom and Dad told me." Her apology, unlike my mother's, felt completely sincere. Caitlin had been as much a pawn in my parents' dysfunctional game as I had been. Just from the privileged side. "We have a lot of work to do to rebuild this family," Harold said, looking around the table. "If that's even possible. But today is a start." As the meeting concluded, I felt a complex mix of emotions: vindication, grief for what should have been, cautious hope for what might still be. The family secrets had been fully exposed. And now we would have to find a way forward in the harsh light of truth. 6 months after the confrontation at my grandfather's house, I stood in the reception area of Mitchell and Green Financial Advisors, the new firm Harold had helped me establish in partnership with Walter Green. The family business restructuring had created an opportunity for this spin-off company, with Walter bringing his expertise and client relationships, and me contributing my financial training and fresh perspective. The changes in my life had been swift and significant. My student loans were paid off through the restitution process Harold had orchestrated. I moved to a better apartment, and for the first time, experienced what it felt like to make financial decisions without the crushing weight of educational debt. But the most profound changes weren't financial. They were relational. Caitlin had undergone perhaps the most dramatic transformation. Confronted with the reality of her unearned privilege, she had responded with genuine remorse and a determination to stand on her own feet. She had found a job at a graphic design firm, moved to a modest apartment she paid for herself, and begun therapy to address the psychological impact of our parents' dysfunctional parenting. "I never knew who I really was," she told me during one of our newly established monthly dinners. "Everything was handed to me, so I never had to discover my own capabilities. It's scary starting from scratch at 25, but it's also liberating." Our relationship, once distant and strained by unacknowledged inequity, had evolved into something more authentic. We were getting to know each other as adults, without our parents' distorting influence. It wasn't always easy. We had nearly 3 decades of complicated history to work through, but it was honest. My parents' journey had been more challenging. My father, faced with the consequences of his financial mismanagement and favoritism, had initially retreated into angry denial. The loss of his controlling position in the family business had been a significant blow to his ego. But as months passed, something seemed to shift. Perhaps it was Harold's influence. Or perhaps it was simply the natural reckoning that comes when one's mistakes can no longer be ignored. One morning, he appeared at my office without warning. "Do you have a few minutes?" he asked, his usual confidence notably absent. We sat in my small conference room, an uncomfortable silence stretching between us. I've been doing a lot of thinking, he finally said. And a lot of therapy. He said the word as if it were foreign to him, which it likely was. I've had to face some difficult truths about myself and the kind of father I've been. I listened without interrupting, cautious but willing to hear him out. The way I treated you was wrong, he continued. I told myself I was preparing you for the real world, making you stronger. But the truth is, I was repeating patterns from my own childhood, just in reverse. My father favored my brother, so I favored your sister. It was unconscious, but that's no excuse. His admission wasn't perfectly delivered, it was halting and clearly uncomfortable for him, but it was the most honest conversation we'd ever had. I'm not asking for forgiveness, he clarified. I haven't earned that yet. But I am asking for a chance to try to do better going forward. My mother's approach had been different. She'd sent tearful emails and text messages, alternating between genuine remorse and occasional slides back into justification. She was trying, in her way, to understand the harm that had been done. We had begun meeting for coffee every few weeks, our conversations gradually becoming more authentic, though still carefully navigating around the most painful topics. The greatest support throughout this process had been my grandfather Harold. At 78, he had taken on the role of family healer with remarkable energy and wisdom. He had established a family education fund with strict governance to ensure equal access for future generations. He spoke openly about the dangers of favoritism and the importance of financial transparency within families. The trouble with family wealth, he told me once, is that it magnifies whatever dysfunction already exists. Money doesn't create character flaws, but it certainly enables them to flourish unchecked. His insights helped me understand that my parents' behavior, while inexcusable, was part of a larger pattern they themselves had been caught in. Breaking that pattern would require conscious effort from all of us. My own healing journey had been complex. Working with a therapist specializing in family trauma, I began to process the years of subtle and not so subtle messages that I was somehow less deserving than my sister. I learned to recognize the ways these messages had shaped my self-perception and my approach to relationships. Financial trauma is real, my therapist explained. When it's inflicted by the people who are supposed to love and protect you unconditionally, the impact goes far beyond the monetary aspects. Gradually, I came to understand that my worth had never been tied to my parents' financial support or lack thereof. The resilience and self-reliance I had developed were valuable traits, even if they had been forged in unfair circumstances. As part of the healing process, I established clear boundaries with my parents. Our relationship would need to be rebuilt slowly, if at all. Trust, once broken so thoroughly, could not be instantly restored with apologies and financial restitution. The family business now operated under new governance, with Harold taking a more active role in oversight and my father in a reduced capacity focused on client relationships rather than financial management. The changes had been difficult but necessary, bringing transparency and accountability to systems that had operated too long in the shadows. In a surprising turn, Walter Green had become something of a mentor to me. His decision to partner with me in our new venture had been partly motivated by guilt over his role in enabling my parents' financial favoritism. But it had evolved into a genuine professional relationship based on mutual respect. You have a natural talent for this work, he told me one evening as we finished a client proposal. Not just the technical aspects, but the human element, understanding that behind every financial decision is a person with hopes, fears, and family dynamics. His words reminded me that sometimes our deepest wounds, when properly healed, become our greatest strengths. As I reflect on the journey of the past year, I'm struck by how differently things could have turned out. Had I maintained my silence, had I accepted the unfairness as simply the way things are, nothing would have changed. The toxic patterns would have continued, perhaps extending into the next generation. Instead, by confronting the truth directly but with an ultimate goal of healing rather than revenge, something remarkable happened. Not a perfect fairy tale ending. Our family still has considerable work to do, but a genuine opportunity for change and growth. The experience has taught me that family patterns, even those decades in the making, can be broken. That accountability, while painful, is essential for healing. And that sometimes the most loving thing we can do for our families is to demand honesty, even when that honesty reveals uncomfortable truths. Have you ever experienced favoritism in your family? Financial or otherwise? How did you handle it? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to support more content about navigating complex family dynamics. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and remember that healing is always possible, even from the deepest wounds.